everybody, and welcome to our ninth episode here of the K2 podcast. We're going to have a great show tonight for you guys, and I do want to quickly, before we get into tonight's show, I just want to recap something from last week. We were able to raise over $200 for Feed More for the local food bank, so I want to say a big shout out to everybody who supported that, and also I want to give a special thank you to one of our viewers, Angela, who donated $100 out of her personal pocket to also donate to help struggling families during this difficult time. But without further delay, I would love to welcome tonight's special guest. He's here to talk with us about staying sane during quarantine. He's a writer, was a writer for Jay Leno's Tonight Show for 20 years, a public speaker who appeared on TED Talks, also a comedian, mental health advocate, and is also featured on CNN's Business Unusual. Welcome to the show, everybody. Frank King. Thanks for joining us, Frank. Certainly. No worries. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you, where you're from, stuff like that. Nice. Nice. Mm-hmm.
To give you the nerve to get up and do it. So I went twice. And I thought, man, I'm that funny just walking around. So I got up on my third night,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a great set. I mean, for somebody who just, started. And I thought, I heard inside my head, you're home. And the next thing I heard was, I'm going to do this for a living. I have no idea how, but I am going to do it for a living. And a year later, I asked my girlfriend, now my wife, I said, I'm going on the road to be a stand-up comic full time. I got 10 weeks booked, clubs. Do you want to come along? She goes, yeah. So we put everything we couldn't fit into my Dodge Colt into storage. And we were on the road together for 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop, 7 years and change. Nothing but a P.O. box and voicemail. And I opened up for and lived with Dennis Miller, Rosie O'Donnell, Adam Sandler, Jeff Foxworthy, Ron White, Bill Engvall, Ellen,
Wow.
Kevin Nealon, Kevin James. Yeah, back when they were just comics. And then that came to an end in 93 when I went to work at a radio station in my old hometown of Raleigh, North Carolina, as a morning DJ. And I took a number one morning show from number one to number 6 in 18 months. One of my proudest accomplishments.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I didn't just drive it into the ground. I drove it into Middle Earth. I left the radio station and the comedy club thing was drying up. So I went into corporate comedy, the rubber chicken circuit.
Yes, sir.
Did that for about 10, 12 years. Then the recession hit.
Okay.
Business dropped off 80%. My wife and I lost everything we worked for in 25 years in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And that's when I found out what the barrel of my gun tastes like. Spoiler alert, I didn't pull the trigger.
Understood.
I got a friend of mine who came up to me after a keynote. He goes, hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I go, hey, man, could you try to sound a little less disappointed? So I always wanted to make a living and a difference. I just never figured out what I could say to anybody, teach anybody. And after that close call, did some research on my family. Turns out it runs in the family. And so I decided to speak on suicide prevention.
Uh-huh. So it is, not to cut you off there, but it is something that's, I don't know if genetic is the right word, but if it runs in the family, so it is. That's interesting. I've never heard that before. I didn't know. That's something new to me.
Yeah, don't feel bad. Not many people know. It's called generational depression and suicide.
Interesting.
My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. And I came awfully close to dying by suicide in 2010. And so, yeah, that's when I realized it's familial. My dad gave me a bad heart valve. My mother gave me high cholesterol and mental illness. They both gave me a great sense of humor. So it's kind of a mixed bag. And I firmly believe that my comic ability is simply the flip side of my mental illness. It's all part of the same wiring.
Sure.
I did a TED talk called Mental with Benefits, the evolutionary advantages of mental illness.
Right. I've seen that. I saw that you put that on, and what I'll do is for any of the links you and I've been communicating back and forth. All those links will be in the description of the video.
Oh, good.
So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, it's everybody I've ever met who wasn't completely dysfunctional but was mentally ill had some kind of superpower, artistic, musical, writing. My sister, who has depression and anxiety, said, "Superpower? We're not the X-Men, we're the Xanax Men." So that's the premise of that particular book. I have two mental illnesses: major depressive disorder, depression, and chronic suicidal ideation, which means for me and people like me, the option of suicide always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And in my TED Talks, I say, when I say small, my car broke down a couple of years ago. I had 3 thoughts unbidden: get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could just kill myself. That is chronic suicidal ideation. There may be somebody listening to this podcast who's nodding along now. Right. Oh, dear God, I had no idea that had a name.
Well, that's what I was just thinking of. And I have to say, there's been times where I don't think this comes to a light, and maybe I'm using the words wrong here, but something like you say, the car breaks down, or just any hiccup in your life that you deal with, sometimes I don't think you realize the gravity or the impact that it has. And you kind of brought it up there talking about, hey, my car broke down, but an option for me was possibly taking my own life. As, something that may seem minute to somebody else, but to another person could have a severe impact. So that's interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah, and almost every time I keynote, somebody comes up afterwards who heard that story. They didn't know, they have the same thought process. They didn't know it had a name. They thought they were just some kind of freak. And their relief is palpable that there are other people out there who think the same way. That's my why. That's why I do what I do.
Right. It's interesting. Well, let me ask you, since, right now, the current state of the country, was predominantly locked down, how do you think that's affecting people? What are you noticing as a result of this as it relates to mental health and maybe domestic abuse, child abuse, and maybe some practical solutions or ideas to overcome those obstacles?
Yeah, domestic abuse is up, child abuse is up, and calls to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline are up. What I do when I do a webinar on social distancing and staying sane is I teach people some of the practices that people with mental illness use every day to get themselves out of the bed in the morning. Because somebody said to me, the world's so uncertain. Hey, look, as somebody with mental illness, the world was uncertain before COVID.
That's true.
It'll be uncertain after.
That's certainly true. That's certainly true.
I've got this. So I tell people, here's what you do. There's a guy who was an astronaut for a year in the space station. Saw an article online about him. They asked him, how do you handle isolation like that? And he did a lot of things that people with mental illness do. It's called a safe care plan. It's about your mental health. He said, you got to have a schedule. You go to bed at the same time every night. Even though you don't have to go to work, you set your alarm and get up.
That's a good point.
And you schedule your meals and your playtime and your consuming of media time. And I recommend meditation twice a day. I do a thing called the Cat Napper. It's an MP3. It's a guided meditation, takes you down, brings you back up. I do it right after a meal. So I have a meal at a certain time, meditation. Then I go back to work, then have a meal, meditation. Exercise, I got an old Nordic track.
Okay.
I know those. Kevin, it's not as easy as it looks. It's taking me quite a while.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and I'm like, it's I haven't got the muscle memory quite down yet, but I'm getting it. First time I did it for 10 minutes. The other day I did it for 30, and I was proud of myself.
Hey, I don't knock it one bit. Don't knock it one
Yeah.
bit. But I think that is important, you know, especially with a lot of the gyms and stuff closed, just being kind of active to the best of your ability with, you know, while still maintaining social distancing and following the quarantine guidelines. So I think that's very cool, and glad to hear you say that. But hearing that you've struggled with mental health, you saying you've attempted suicide. What do you think the main reasons behind that was? You know, and I heard you say it runs in your family as well. But what do you think the main reasons behind that was?
Well, for me and people like me, it's generally not situational.
Mm-hmm.
I've been most depressed and suicidal at some of the best times in my life.
Interesting.
I always worried, what would I feel like at the worst time in my life? And now I know. Mm-hmm. Because a situation can trigger it, but it's for me, it's just the way, it's like a wheel with a flat spot. Mm-hmm. Every so often, major depressive disorder, it lasts 2 days to 2 weeks and it recurs. Now with medication, my downtime is shorter and farther apart, but I didn't start taking medication until I was 60. I was using a supplement in the meantime called SAMe, SAM-E. You get it at Costco, 400 milligrams first thing in the morning. And it's good on mild depression. And it got me through many a day. But when I turned 60, my wife goes, honey, you're 60, for goodness sakes. Ask your doctor.
Yeah, I think a lot of men struggle with that. You know, I'm always one of those guys that've been like, man, I don't want to go to the doctor. Like, I don't know. But I think that's something I've got to come and overcome and get better at. I'm always so worried about the doctor. Like, I don't need the doctor. So I understand that.
Well, Kevin, don't feel bad because you are hardwired for that because you're a man. It's true. It's called toxic masculinity. Big boys don't cry. Big boys don't reach out for help. You know, big boys, when they find a lump in their testicle, wait too long. Yeah. They put off their PSA test. They put off their colonoscopy until too late. Mm-hmm. That's why women live longer than men. Okay. One of the reasons is that women tend to take those signs seriously, and men, you know.
So I'll be all right. I'll be fine. Yeah.
And with mental health, the number one at-risk occupation in the U.S. is construction for suicide.
Interesting.
Think about it.
Didn't know that.
Well, you got a lot of guys, male heavy, and rough and tough guys generally, kind of guys who wouldn't reach out to seek help. And that's why that's that toxic masculinity. That's that. We wrote a book called Guts, Grit, and the Grind, a men's mental mechanics manual. Stories of 12 guys. Each one has a problem. And, you know, the stories go like this. First 500 words, things are good. Second 500 words, things go bad. Last 500 words, here's how I clawed my way back, and here's what I'm doing to cope. Because the guys we surveyed said, look, we want stories of men, by men, who have suffered these things. Stories. And we want to know how they're coping. So that's why we decided on the format, the anthology with the 12 guys. Each one has a story, the hero's journey. And because 8 out of 10 people who die in the U.S. of suicide right now are men, most of them age 45, 54, because of the people think all the jobs went overseas. Only about 83, 85% of the jobs, only 15 to 18% went overseas. The other 83 to 85% of the blue collar good jobs, artificial intelligence and robots. So
that's on the rise. Yeah. That's on the uptick. I know. I'm not going to share. I know a few personal stories of that, people who are that work in that kind of industry, and their jobs are kind of being slowly phased out in a sense. So I agree with that. I don't want to share their personal information, but so let me ask you, when you talk about the suicide and how you dealt with it, how did you bounce back from those experiences? You described it as like a flat wheel, you know, as it rolls and you hit that spot. How do you get that wheel rolling again, and what's the healing process like for you? And how would you what kind of advice could you give to that?
Well, for me and people like me, there is no heal. I used to say that I battle depression, but battle implies you can win, and I can't. I can lose and kill myself, or I can tie, you know. And what I do is I try to just go through it and come out the other end. There's a martial art I've taken a little bit of called Aikido.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, the whole premise of Aikido is when somebody punches at you, rather than block it, you blend with their energy. Then you take their balance and you do the fall. So I try to do that with depression. Rather than fight it, I try to blend with that energy because it has a great deal of energy and use that to move forward. Just put one foot in front of the other.
That's a good way of putting it. I like that. That's a very great way of putting it.
Well, and I do something, and I tell people who are suffering now with the social isolation, Frank, I can't get out of bed in the morning. What do you do? I said, well, here's what I do. It's called gamification. I make a game of it. I've got one of those projection clocks on the ceiling. So I look at the clock and I go, okay, it's 4:25 in the morning. I'm going to get up at 4:30. So I lie there relaxing, and 4:30 comes, boom, I'm up. I make a list of to do 6 or 8 things. And the game is once, if I'm in that place where I really don't want to get out of bed, I want to crawl back in bed and Netflix, binge watch Netflix, the new season of Ozark or Altered Carbon or whatever.
Sure.
The game is once I've checked all 8 items off my to-do list, I don't care what time of day it is or if it's broad daylight, I can go back to bed and pull the covers over my head and binge watch Netflix. It's called gamification. It gets me to the gym. The gym's about 25 minutes away, but the longest mile for me, Kevin, is from my bed to the car.
Yeah, I'm sure. Sounds like me too.
So my deal with myself is if I get to the gym, all I got to do is 1 rep of 1 exercise. I can turn around and go home. Now, once I'm there, I'm usually there hour and a half. But the difficult part is getting to the gym. But what gets me there is I know I can walk in. Okay, right. I'm gone. I got to tell you, the other night, last gig I did was in Chicago, nice hotel, nice gym. I'm all dressed up, in my gym clothes. I go downstairs and I'm like, oh man, I'm so tired. I just want to go to bed. So I got on the elliptical runner. I did a minute and a half and I went to bed because that's the game. If I get to the gym.
Right. No, I think I had a fitness coach on the young lady by Lizzie, and that's one of the things we discussed about. It was just getting into the gym is like that first step. So I think that's important. I think that's very important. And also somebody like me, I know one thing that was important for me is whenever I'm one of those people that like if I go walking, sometimes I will, instead of like, okay, I'm going to walk around the block, I don't stop. I'll continue. I'm like, you know what? Let me just go again. I'll do it another loop. And then sometimes I get just going on and on and on. But yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. So another thing is, as a comedian and speaking on things like depression and suicide, how does that all work? How did, you explained a little bit how you got into comedy and, telling your first joke in 4th grade, but how does that all develop into what you have now, relating to depression and suicide, but also balancing the comedian life as well?
Well, I was a comedian for a long time and I wanted to have something to teach. And I realized that what I have to teach, when I coach speakers, if there's something organic about them, there's a woman who speaks on sleep. She's a sleep advocate.
Okay.
And the reason is she's in law school. She thinks everybody is as sleepy as she is. Turns out she has narcolepsy.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. So when people ask her, why do you speak on sleep? How'd you pick that? I said, here's your answer to them. The topic picked me. It's organic to her.
Okay.
Yeah. So the suicide and the depression are organic to me.
Right.
It's not like I chose customer service or
right. Well, and what I think about that is too, it makes the comedy a little bit more relatable in the sense that it's something that you've experienced, that you've dealt with, and it makes the story that much more real or that much more relatable than somebody who, let's say, never worked in customer service but wants to get up there and tell a customer service joke. Maybe that joke won't translate as well as if you've been in the trenches and dealt with these issues.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting.
In comedy, Kevin, there's a rule. Because people have said to me, how can you make fun of depression and thoughts of suicide? How can you joke about that? Well, in comedy, here's the rule. You can make fun of any group to which you belong.
Right. Okay.
So if I were neuronormal, I could not get away with the stuff I talk about.
Right. Understood.
Because I tell the audience up front that, the taste of the barrel of the gun, I give them that pretty much up front.
Right.
So they know that because you can see the people who are mentally ill have an illness.
Yeah, and then they instantly get on the defensive, probably like, oh, who's this guy? And then
Yeah, and then I say that, and you can see him go. I had a young woman come up to me at Lynchburg College, and she said, "Can I give you a hug?" Now this is right in the middle of the Me Too movement. I'm thinking, oh dear God.
Oh God.
Everybody's got a camera,
right?
I can see the picture tomorrow. I know speaker gropes co-ed. So I said, sure. And I gave her a real, brotherly hug with my pelvis back. And I said to her, are you a hugger? And she goes, no. I go, well, why the hug? She goes, I've been in therapy for 2 years. And the young woman who's my therapist is very good. Mm-hmm. She's a clinician. She knows her stuff, but she has no context. She goes, I'm sitting in the back of the room. You're 15 minutes in. I'm like, this guy is in my head. You did more for me in 45 minutes than she's done in 2 years.
Wow. I bet you that was a nice compliment to receive.
Well, and that's my why, Kevin. That's why I do. I realized somewhere along the line, mm-hmm. I'm like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life.
Okay.
I've seen what these people's lives would be like if I weren't there to speak and let them know they're not alone.
Sure. I think that's important.
Maybe I've steered them just far enough off the path of suicide, they'll live a normal life. And my second thought, Kevin, was I can't kill myself now because if I did, I'd take all those people with me.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So you're talking about some of this positive stuff, but I certainly want to keep that positive momentum. But let me ask, what was your worst show like? Did you ever have like a bad show? I'd like to hear about your worst show or who maybe your favorite comedian is.
Worst show, 2 of them. My first cruise gig. Uh-huh. It was a Christmas cruise, and the Christmas time cruises have changed, Kevin, in the last decade. But back then, the people on a Christmas cruise were people whose families couldn't stand them. So rather than give grandma and grandpa knickknacks and bric-a-brac, they'd pool their money mm-hmm. and send them on a cruise at Christmas to get them away from the dinner table. So I'm on a boat with 2,500 people and nobody can stand. I did 2 shows, 45 minutes each, stone cold silence.
Damn.
My wife sitting in the audience said she could hear, it was so quiet, she could hear my tongue sticking to the roof of my mouth.
Oh, man.
She said it's like watching someone you love get beat up and there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah, and I kept it clean because a lot of comics in a situation like that will go dirty hoping to get the audience, and I just marched through my clean material. That's why I had a 10-year career in the cruise lines because I never lowered the bar.
Okay, interesting. Who would you say is your favorite comedian? Do you have one?
Yeah, currently it's in the U.S. It's Bill Burr.
Okay.
And out of Boston.
Okay.
And then there's a guy in England named Jimmy Carr.
I don't think I've heard of Jimmy Carr. That's interesting. I'll have to look him up.
Yeah, type into YouTube "world's most offensive joke."
Uh-huh.
He's brilliant. He comes out and he goes, "Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start off mildly offensive. I'm gonna crank it up a notch each joke." And I mean, he does it. It's amazing to watch. He goes until somebody in the audience screams, "For God's sake, stop." And somewhere in there, somebody screams, "For God's sake, stop."
Well, let me ask. So I've personally thought about pursuing a career in comedy once upon a time. Now, I've definitely, I don't know, I thought it would be something I would be interested in. Then, the fear sets in and all these other things like, standing up on a stage in front of people, lights beaming down on you, all these things came across my mind.
Sure.
But what were some of the tips that you could maybe give to somebody pursuing comedy? And I've heard this one joke that somebody always tells. I spoke to a comedian in the past who said, don't. That was like, he said, I was like, what kind of tips can you give? Yeah, he's like, don't pursue it. He's like, that's the tip I would give. But is there anything practical that you could give and, any advice on that?
Where are you? Where are you based?
I'm in Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.
Okay. There's got to be a comedy club around there somewhere.
There is. It's called the Funny Bone.
Okay. Chances are the Funny Bone has a comedy class.
Okay.
Call them up and go, "Hey, you guys have stand-up comedy classes?" Usually, Kevin, it's about 6 weeks. And graduation is you get up, and you use that 6 weeks, they help you construct your first 5 minutes.
Okay.
And at the end, they have a graduation. And you invite friends and family, and all the other students invite friends and family and the public. And everybody gets up and does their 5 minutes. And because at the end of 6 weeks, you've been on stage a bunch of times, you've been standing in the lights a bunch of times, behind the microphone. So you have a feel for the
Developing that comfortability.
Yeah, that's really what they're doing, is making you comfortable on stage. So week 7 or whatever, when you go up there, you're not worried. The lights don't bother you. You know what to expect. It's a friendly crowd because it's everybody's friends and family. And it's one of the very few careers, Kevin, you can make a decision that night. I mean, my first 5 minutes on stage at the Comedy Store in La Jolla, I heard inside my head, first, I'm home. Second, I'm going to do this for a living. I have no idea how, but I'm going to do it. So it's one of those things where you can make a decision in 5 minutes whether it's for you or not.
Right.
Let me tell you a book to buy.
Okay.
The Comedy Bible by Judy Carter.
Okay.
And buy the new Comedy Bible, the one she just wrote last October. The new Comedy Bible. It's all about constructing that first 5, 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
It's a how-to. How do you come up with premises? How do you come up with punchlines? How do you string them together? Okay. How do you act them out? It's a great book.
And that's the Comedy Bible.
The Comedy Bible. But buy the new Comedy Bible, the edition that came out last fall.
Okay, interesting. Okay, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's great. I had no idea that they offered classes. I thought it was just something like, hey, open mic night on this night. You just show up and just give it your best shot. So it's good to hear that they have some classes. That's kind of interesting.
Well, some people, I never took a class, but I mean, I've been funny all my life.
Sure.
I joke just, wherever.
Sure.
But some guys just get up without a class. But, the class is really, because I taught classes when I lived in Raleigh and worked at the radio station. Mm-hmm. The people who took my classes, Kevin, were like you. They thought, I'd like to try that.
Right.
So all I was really doing was getting them comfortable on stage. They already kind of had funny stories in their heads, and I helped them organize them into 5 minutes. So by the time we get done, ready for graduation, you're comfortable on stage. You know how you're going to start, in the middle, and the end. So it's just a way of getting people comfortable that first time.
No, that makes sense. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll give it a shot at some point. I think that's pretty cool. So getting into the next thing here, comedy was something, I'm guessing, that you started off fairly early. How did that translate into working on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno? How did that come about?
Well, you're probably not old enough to remember, but that's something old people say all the time. You're probably not. But back in the day, Leno was Johnny's permanent guest host.
Okay.
And Johnny was very mercurial. He could change his mind, drop of a hat. Mm-hmm. So on a Friday night, he would say to the staff, look, I'm taking next week off. Now it's Friday. Mm-hmm. Mondays was always a rerun, Best of Carson. That meant Jay had 4 nights, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 monologues, 18 jokes per monologue. That's a lot of clean jokes.
Sure.
So he started contracting with comedians, road comics like me. Uh-huh. And when he would put the call out, I'd send in 2 dozen jokes a day by fax. And I was getting 1 or 2 on a week in his monologue. And then when he got the Tonight Show for real, they let most of them go. Mm-hmm. But I got the new fax number. Mm-hmm. And so I stayed with him doing that until he left and went to CNBC.
Interesting. And what kind of guy did you ever get an opportunity to speak with him, or not often, or how did that go? Did you ever have those kind of opportunities?
I saw him one time in Charlotte, North Carolina. Went to the show at the auditorium and waited afterwards. And then I was at the Comedy Magic Club in Hermosa Beach.
Okay. Well,
now, bear in mind, I met Leno once already. I'm at Hermosa Beach. I come up behind him. I go, hey, Jay. He turns around and goes, hey, Frank, we'd met once. He's got a prodigious memory. Amazing.
Right. Well, and so this is kind of a tricky question. You may not have the answer to it. When you develop some of these jokes and you would send them in for the show, was there a joke that particularly didn't translate the way that you had envisioned it or the way that you would have said it? Did you ever notice anything like that, you think?
Well, I tried to write in his voice.
Okay. I mean, if that's not hard to do in the sense when I hear Jay Leno, the first thing I think about is that voice. Yeah, I hear that voice instantly.
And one time, Kevin, he did a joke that I sent him word for word, syllable for syllable. Uh-huh. Which means, most time it was like 90% me, But that one was 100%. He didn't change a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I was flattered that he actually, but when you write for somebody, no matter who it is, whether you're working on a speech forum or comedy forum or comedy in a speech, you want to make sure it doesn't sound like you just bolted on a joke. You want to make sure it's in their voice and fits the material.
Makes sense. No, that makes sense. And have you written any books by chance?
As a matter of fact, funny you should ask.
Okay.
It's called Guts, Grit, and the Grind.
And you did mention that, and I actually have the link in the description of this video, so definitely you can go to, I think it's gutsgritandgrind.com, is that right?
Gutsgritgrind.com, yeah. Or go to Amazon and type in Guts Grit Grind. You'll find the printed version. It's like $23. The ebook is $3.99. And I just finished voicing. That's why my voice is shot.
Sure.
The book for Audible. So May 1st, we're going to release it on Audible, and I voiced the book.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was part of my deal with the ladies. I go, look, I'll make it funny. I'll put in the car metaphors, but I want to be an author, and I want to voice it for Audible.
Okay.
They said, fine. So
that's pretty interesting. And you said people can purchase that on Amazon, right?
Yep.
Is there any other spots that you can pick it up? Is there any physical locations?
No, it's just Amazon and Barnes & Noble, all the major distributors.
Right, understood.
And you get the ebook for $3.99 or the paperback for $23.
Okay. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time this evening, but I do want to say, is there anything else that you have in mind? Like, where can people find you, whether it's Instagram, social media?
Well, if they go to thementalhealthcomedian.com, thementalhealthcomedian.com. And here's what I tell people, Kevin, and you can put this in the show notes. If you're suicidal, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
Okay.
If you're just having a really bad day and you're mentally ill, call a crazy person, because we're not going to judge. We're just going to listen. So you can put my cell phone number in the show notes, or they can go to my website, The Mental Health Comedian. My phone number's there, and people call me, whether it's about themselves or a loved one or a college roommate.
Sure.
Or a sister. Guy called me the other day about his sister-in-law. She was suicidal. What do I do? I gave him the 411 on what he should be doing. It's not always, you may have to call the cops, and she's going to be mad.
Yeah.
Let's go back to social distancing for a second.
Sure.
Here's some advice. Limit your media.
Mm-hmm.
Don't leave the television on 24/7, whether it's CNN, MSNBC, Fox, whatever, especially the kids, because they're going to be sucking that stuff up.
Sure.
Body bags, mass graves.
Yeah.
So plan your time. I tend to listen to the governors and the mayors because they're on the ground. In Oregon, I listen to the governor and the mayor of our city because they're right here.
Mm-hmm.
They know what's going on. If I was in New York,
I don't know. I don't know if you could say that about every governor or mayor, but I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. Well, depends on the state. Yeah. Also, you have to advocate for yourself, whether it's your physical health.
Yes, sir.
I sent a note through the portal at my doctor's office to my cardiologist. Hey, man, what should I be doing above and beyond what everybody else is doing, because I've had the 2 aortic valve replacements? And he sent an email back and gave me some extra instructions. And when it comes to finances, which is a big stressor, you can't stick your head in the sand. You got to call your mortgage company, because the stimulus bill, I believe, allows people to not make mortgage payments for 6 months and then re-up for 6 more months, and then get a loan modification. Call your utilities, gas, electricity, water, trash, cable, phone. They all have something going where you can adjust based on your financial situation. But you have to reach out.
Right.
It's like mental health. You've got to reach out. And, it's better
and
to
I think
know
that's important and really awesome of you to put your number out there like that and be available to people that, maybe in need of assistance. So I will definitely put that number up there. And also on the podcast here, there's a number I put at the bottom of below the videos. You and I can't see it right now talking, but below our video, there's the suicide prevention hotline number there as well.
Yeah.
So they'll definitely be able to contact that as well. So I appreciate that.
Can I tell you, do you have time for a funny story?
No,
Kevin?
absolutely, sir.
Okay. Guy calls me up, young guy. I pick up the phone. He goes, man, I can't believe this is your cell phone. How mean would that be? To
Oh
put the
yeah.
phone on the screen. I said, I'll make it worse for you. What if I did that and what you heard was, hold please.
Oh, that would be terrible.
Oh, wait, there's more. I said, here's a comic ending. The on-hold music is this. Another one bites the dust.
Oh,
And another
Lord.
one.
Oh, Lord. That's actually pretty good, though.
Yeah, he couldn't believe I picked up the phone.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
And Kevin, one more piece of advice for you for comedy.
Sure.
And I tell everybody this who wants to be a comedian. Go to amateur night at the Funny Bone twice.
Okay.
See how bad 75 to 80. I'm telling you, you'll be amazed how bad they are. You'll watch and think, how could they get up and do that?
I've heard that before as well, though. I've heard other people give some advice, and they've said the same thing. They're like, once you go see some of these other guys, it'll give you a little bit of a boost of a confidence, you know?
Yeah. It'll give you the courage to go up because you're thinking, man, I can do at least that bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if they tank, I mean, heck, at least it's two of us tanking now, not just me, myself, and I. So
well, here's my last advice. A safe care plan for mentally ill people. Sure. Mine is diet, exercise. I'm on a keto diet. I do 18-6 fasting, intermittent fasting. Fast 18 hours, eat 6. Exercise, we talked about.
Yep.
Get a good night's sleep.
Yep. And
set your alarm and get out of bed. Get out of bed, shave, shower, get dressed. You're not dressed like going to work, but get dressed. Meditation. Medication if you need it, because some people may have a short-term transient depression. So talk to somebody if you feel seriously depressed.
Sure.
Get evaluated. Find out if you have like a situational depression. Because I had a cousin who had it, and her husband passed away. Very difficult. And 6 months she was on antidepressants, and then she tapered off and never again. So there are people who have situational, short-term, transient depression. So,
and as a man, and I just want to bring up, we talked about it earlier, but as a man, make sure that if you feel like you're maybe in need, don't be afraid to reach out, go seek some help or something like that. I think that's something that doesn't get a lot of attention. As a man, like you said, people get that toxic masculinity, but I think it is important to reach out for help if you need it.
Well, what we discovered, Kevin, was men oftentimes will not reach out, but if offered help. So let me give you a couple of signs that somebody may be depressed. Eat too much, can't eat. Sleep too much, can't sleep. They let their personal hygiene go. So they used to be all, well put together, and the hair's maybe dirty, the clothes. Have trouble getting to work or getting up in the morning and rally in the afternoon. Those are signs of depression.
Sure.
And what you say, here's what you don't say. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, turn that frown upside down. Have you tried fish oil? Here's what you do say. I'm here for you and mean it. I know you're not crazy, lazy, or self-absorbed. I know that mental depression is a mental illness. The good news is, with time and treatment, things will get better. I'll take the time. I'll help you get the treatment. And here's the question you have to ask, Kevin. Are you having thoughts of suicide? It's tough to ask, but you got to ask it just that way. And if you can't ask it, if you think somebody's depressed and you can't ask that question, find somebody who can. If they say they are suicidal, having thoughts of suicide, you say, do you have a plan? A plan. If they have a plan, what is your plan? If it's detailed, time, place, method, they need to be on the phone with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If they won't pick up the phone, you pick it up, call the volunteer, and they'll do their best to get it in the hands of the person who's in crisis. Okay. Now, for younger people like you, they have a text line. Text the word help to 741-741. There'll be somebody your age on the other end to text back and forth with.
That's pretty cool.
When do you call the police? I get that question all the time. If they're in immediate danger to themselves or others, you got no choice but to dial 911. Now, bear in mind, that's going to buy them a 3-day stay, all expenses paid, in a gated mental health community with no shoestrings or belt, right? But they'll be alive. So that's kind of the 411 on depression.
No, that's. I'm glad you brought that up. That was actually really good information. So thank you for that. So just to do a quick recap here, like I said, I want to say thank you for coming on, joining us for the show. I think we offered a lot of good insight and it just means a lot to me. So to be able to kind of spread awareness to things like this. So I definitely appreciate that. You can find Mr. King here, Frank King. You can get his book on gutsgritgrind.com, thementalhealthcomedian.com. Also, he's on YouTube. I'll link all of this stuff in the description down below. But Frank, I really do appreciate you coming on and spending your time with us this evening, sir.
Well, and here's something your podcast listeners don't know, Kevin.
Okay.
Is that you and I undoubtedly don't agree on anything political.
That's right. 100%.
I live in Oregon because you're not allowed to pump your own gas, because I'm such a flaming liberal. If I pump my own gas, I'd burst into flames. But COVID, the depression, thoughts of suicide, doesn't care what political party you belong to.
That's true. Very true.
That's all we care about. That's what we agree on.
And that's one thing that we and you had discussed. You know, we may not agree politically, but being able to come together, what side of the fence you're on, because I think, like you said, it doesn't discriminate against anyone. Everybody can relate to this in some form or fashion. So, no, I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, it's, we all agree that people are struggling and they need help. And they reach out, and I hope they'll reach out if they do.
Certainly. Well, Frank, it was a pleasure having you, sir. Genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for coming on. Look forward to being in contact with you. I'll make sure I'll reach out to you after the show and just touch base and everything, okay?
Kevin, can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
Did you record this?
Yes, sir. This is live. No, this show is live. It's a live show.
What?
Yeah, we've been live the whole time.
What?
Yeah.
Well, do you also record it, or do you not?
I mean, they're archived. I do archive them afterwards, so I'll send you all the links and details and information afterwards.
Yeah, because I'd love to put them up on my social media. And,
sure. Yeah, no, I'd love that. No, that would be great. But yes, sir, I will make sure I send all of that to you.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Frank. You have a great evening, sir.
Thanks, Kevin.
Take care.
See ya.
All right, guys, so there you have it. Mr. Frank King, who was very nice to come on to the show. I did just want to kind of touch base on some of the stuff he had there. I do want to I'll leave the screen like this so you can see that National Suicide Prevention line, because I do think it is important. But I won't take up too much more time this evening. It was very nice to have Frank King on and kind of share some of his stories, or anybody who's thinking about going into the comedian realm. But I don't have anything else for you guys tonight. I think that's going to be about it. So thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Also, I do want to mention in the coming weeks, I have some other interesting guests coming on. I don't want to say their names yet, but I will release that information shortly. And we will kind of talk about some really interesting stuff. So I have some other really cool guests that are coming on in here in the near future within the next couple of weeks. But we will be back here on Monday, next Monday at 7 p.m. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode here of the K2 podcast. You guys take care. Until next week, talk to you later.